Without objection, thank you. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been in this Congress 15 years, and I never thought we'd descend to this level of Orwellian dystopia. Suddenly the tools of the trade are not to get at the truth, but to distract, distort, deflect, and dissemble. To disagree is censorship. To try to correct the facts is to infringe on my right of free speech. Of course, it only works one way. The name of Dr. Fauci has been invoked. I'd love to have him here as a witness to describe his travail in being censored. But of course, with that right-wing censorship comes intimidation and threat and intimations of violence. And a wink-blink that, by the way, violence, can be justified. The violence, for example, here on January 6th has been explicitly excused by some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle as a bunch of tourists who got a little out of hand, a little overexcited. 5 are dead, including my constituent, Capitol Hill police officer, who died the next day from the trauma and shock of that experience. And ironically, talk about free speech and duty, he voted for Donald Trump. But his duty was to be here that day. Often a scolding. And somehow, my freedom to harm with the words I use is considered further evidence of censorship. But we know words have power. And that's why we take care with the words we use. We have mass killings in America. We buried people recently at Pittsburgh because of their identity. Hate speech has consequences. Distortion of the truth has consequences. It's not censorship to try to correct that record. Vaccination denial would have cost millions of more lives in America. 1.1 million fellow Americans are dead today because of the pandemic. And millions are saved because of a vaccine that was developed in record time, and we ought to be celebrating that, not caviling about it. Protective measures were taken to take down disinformation about vaccines and about the nature of the virus and about protective measures we could take, including masks, including social distancing. It was not big brother government trying to exercise its will on an innocent population. It was public health measures to protect lives. Again, something should be celebrated. But no, there's an opportunity to have a conspiracy theory here. There's an opportunity to make political points. And no matter what you may think, Mr. Kennedy, and I revere your name, you're not here to propound your case for censorship. You are here for cynical reasons to be used politically by that side of the aisle to embarrass the current president of the United States, and you're an enabler in that effort today. And it brings shame on a storied name that I revere. I began my political interest with your father, and it makes me profoundly sad to see where we have descended today in this hearing. I yield the balance of my time to Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, the distinguished gentleman from Virginia. We don't have a lot of time to dig into questions, but I would just note for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are former prosecutors, you well know that the opinions of a journalist don't amount to actual evidence of anything, and it is a sign of the desperate attempt to satisfy your conspiracy theories that you're bringing a fringe right
Gentleman's out of
order
time.
to provide evidence of for your investigation, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Johnson from Louisiana.
I'm so grateful for that segue from Mr. Golden, because we're about to talk about hard evidence here. It's really ironic this hearing is covering the left's censorship of opposing viewpoints, and you've all seen it on display all day long. They've been doing exactly that. They've been trying to bully and defame our witnesses and try to cover up their opinions. They actually began the hearing with a motion to prevent them from testifying. You can't make this stuff up. It's on broad display for everybody. They did the same thing yesterday in the hearing with the IRS whistleblowers. You know why? Because the Democrats are panicked right now. They're panicked because it's impossible to cover up the inescapable conclusions of the last few weeks. Let me give you two of them. First, one, the hard evidence, Mr. Goldman and everybody else, now proves that the Biden family is hopelessly corrupt and has apparently engaged in a long pattern of extortion, bribery, influence peddling, and tax fraud and staggering abuses of power. And number two, we're highlighting here today that we now know that a growing list of the most important executive branch agencies of the Biden administration are in on it. They've also been corrupted. They've been weaponized to help cover all this up, the first family's crimes. When we summarize all this stuff, it sounds like a premise of a dystopian novel or something, but it's actually happening right now on our watch. This is not conspiracy theories, this is evidence. Our hearing today is to put a spotlight on one more of these incredible avenues of unprecedented corruption and government cover-up. And here again, a federal court has just affirmed all that hard evidence. It proves that the White House, the Department of Justice, and the FBI, among other agencies, threatened and coerced the social media platforms to censor and suppress disfavored viewpoints and conservatives' social media posts online. I'm grateful we have with us today two individuals, Mr. Kennedy and Ms. Harris, who were directly impacted by that censorship, and the third, Mr. Sauer, who we're about to speak with, serving as lead counsel in the landmark lawsuit against the federal government on this issue. Let's talk facts. The American people are not aware of the magnitude of this case, Mr. Sauer, and its profound implications, because most of the mainstream media is in on it too, and they're trying to bury the story. In brief, in May of last year, the attorneys general of my state, Louisiana, and the state of Missouri filed suit in U.S. District Court of the Western District of Louisiana. This blatant censorship. They went after the blatant censorship by the Biden White House in 9 of its federal agencies. 2 weeks ago on Independence Day, the district court issued a truly extraordinary 155-page court opinion, a ruling granting the plaintiff's request for preliminary injunction. Mr. Sauer, you're lead counsel in that litigation. You referenced some in your opening statement, but let's do it again here because they don't seem to be paying attention. Can you give a summary again of some of the key components of that opinion and the basis for it? I know you mentioned there were 82 pages of detailed factual findings, right?
That is correct. 82 pages, 577 citations of the record evidence. That evidence is drawn from about 20,000 pages of the government's own communications with social media platforms and 6 full-length depositions of senior federal officials with firsthand knowledge of federal censorship practices.
It's absolutely staggering. And now they've tried to bury this and say, well, the Fifth Circuit entered a temporary administrative stay. They granted an expedited briefing and oral argument, however, for August 10th. What's the impact of that? Isn't that routine practice in the Fifth Circuit?
That's a direct quote from the recent Fifth Circuit decision, N. Ray Abbott, which is cited in my written testimony. It's legally incorrect, clearly legally incorrect to describe them as vacating the injunction, which has happened multiple times.
They either don't know the law or, I don't know, they're trying to obscure the facts. That's a theme around here. The White House and the fellow Democrats disputed almost none of the factual findings in the court. Isn't that right?
So far, we've had 2 emergency stay motions from the Department of Justice, one in the district court, one in the Court of Appeals. And what really struck me in reading those is they just don't dispute those 82 pages of factual findings. Almost none of them are directly disputed in what they've filed so far.
So at the very beginning of this lengthy opinion, the court explains the staggering scope of the government censorship uncovered here. At page 2, the court explains, quote, if the allegations made by the plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack on free speech in United States history. The court called it dystopian, Orwellian. How broad has this attack been? How many Americans have been censored, do you think?
There's judicial findings again and again in the opinion of millions of American voices silenced by these efforts.
And it had profound impacts. We know, we just saw the poll and the data that's been entered here, facts, not conjecture. that it probably changed the outcome of the election. The court noted that they suppressed, among other topics, the Hunter Biden laptop story. And the court noted, not you, not me, not Republicans, that millions of Americans were not exposed to that story. Had they been, we know they might have voted differently. We'll never be able to unwind history, but wow, I mean, the profound impacts. What are some of the other categories of speech that the government suppressed with its unconstitutional scheme?
Well, the court made findings on that. I just quote them: opposition to COVID-19 vaccines, opposition to COVID-19 masking and lockdowns, the lab leak theory of COVID-19, opposition to President Biden's policies, statements that the Hunter Biden laptop story was true, oppositions to the policies of government officials in power. All were suppressed. And that's just some examples, many other examples in the court's findings and in the discovery in the case.
I so wish I weren't out of time. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Allred from Texas for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time to Ms. Plaskett.
I thank the gentleman from Texas. Mr. Kennedy's and others here are claiming that they've been censored, but they actually have a huge megaphone. The rules that my colleague tried to bring up were rules that the Republicans made at the beginning of this Congress. They did not allow the Democrats to be part of that. And one of those rules was that if information or testimony might potentially defame an individual, that we would go in executive session. No one was trying to stop him from testifying, but not to give him the megaphone that this group has allowed him to have. I also note, in terms of censorship, that the far-right media has already issued articles about me playing the race card. The race card is something that's often used against Black people for bringing up when they see race hatred being propagated against them. And it's a means to try and keep us quiet and keep us in our place. Oh, you're playing the race card by bringing up what is obvious in our lives, what is obviously happening, race. And so you can keep saying I'm race baiting and try and censor me, but I'm going to continue to tell the truth. I want to be abundantly clear about what else is happening in this room. The MAGA Republicans are trying to scare social media companies into not taking down blatantly false information in the lead up to our 2024 presidential election. Chair Jordan knows, as we do, that when conspiracy theories succeed, so does Donald Trump. Russia interfered in our 2016 election, they attempted in our 2020, and they're going to try to interfere in the 2024 presidential election. We note that Russian trolls sought to suppress the Black vote by unleashing a torrent of social media posts designed to stoke racial tensions and spread incorrect voting information. In 2021, our national intelligence agencies found that proactive information sharing between the government and social media companies facilitated the expeditious review and, in many cases, removal of social media accounts covertly operated by Russia and Iran. Ms. Wiley, if the government is not able to proactively share information with social media companies in 2024, what is likely to have be the ramifications? And I'd ask that you make your answer as succinct as possible because there's a lot of information I need.
I will just quote one thing. Mr. Prigozhin, who's been in the news of late, actually said explicitly and openly that they would continue to try to spread mis and disinformation into the United States and interfere with our elections.
Thank you. They know that Russian interference, that is, the MAGA Republicans know that Trump benefits when Russia interferes. The super PAC that supports, the same super PAC that supports Mr. Kennedy and has raised significant funds on his behalf is run by a man named Jason Bowles. Here's Jason Bowles' Twitter profile, as you can see up on the screen. Jason Bowles isn't just a MAGA supporter. He also ran the super PAC for MAGA Republicans Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, George Santos, and in 2022, he supported Herschel Walker. So the person behind Mr. Kennedy's super PAC is an individual who personally and professionally wants the Republican Party to succeed. Yet, Mr. Kennedy is running as a Democrat. Ms. Wiley, will it benefit Mr. Kennedy as well as the other individuals that are supported by the Super PAC if social media companies are less able to detect and, if needed, if they determine that it's needed, to remove Russian covert information designed to suppress votes in this country?
It is possible.
Thank you. I yield back.
Can I yield the remainder of the time?
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize Mr. Stubbe from Florida for his 5 minutes.
Mr. Kennedy, do you want to respond to that? Can you do that quickly?
Yeah, I've never heard of Mr. Bowles, and I've never heard of that super PAC. This is typical of the accusations against me at this hearing. They are baseless. Every single one. I've been subjected to a parade of defamations. If I believe those things about myself, I wouldn't want to hear me either. I'd want to gag me and lock me in a room somewhere. But none of those are true, and they were all of this parade of accusations and defamations were made against me in a way that was calculated to make sure that I could not respond to any of them. Every one of them I'd like to respond to, but I was not allowed to.
To further the disinformation going on, Ms. Wiley, in response to a question, you stated that the decision in Missouri v. Biden was vacated by the appellate court. Is that correct?
I did, and I want to correct that because Mr. Sauer is right. The appropriate word is stayed.
Administratively stayed. So it hasn't been vacated or dismissed like Mrs. Sanchez
It's
said.
stayed, which means it cannot be implemented right now.
Okay, because I didn't want us to censor your disinformation that you stated as a factual assertion earlier. So
I did misspeak, and I apologize.
Thank you for clarifying that for us. And to talk about more evidence about, I think it's interesting. There's a lot in this opinion, and I have limited time, but I think illustrating some of the actions that the Biden administration took to censor speech is very important. I'm going to read specifically from the opinion. Explicit threats are an obvious form of coercion, but not all coercion needs be explicit. I'm on page 97 of the opinion. The following illustrative specific actions by defendants are examples of coercion exercised by the White House defendants. A, cannot stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. Please remove this count immediately. Sounds like a directive from the White House to me to social media companies. Accuse Facebook of causing political violence by failing to censor false COVID-19 claims. F, this is exactly why I want to know what reduction actually looks like. If reduction means pumping our most vaccine hesitant audience with Tucker Carlson saying it does not work, then I'm not sure it's reduction, implying that they're reducing the information on that. Questioning how the Tucker Carlson video had been demoted since there were 40,000 shares. Wanting to know why Alex Berenson had not been kicked off Twitter because Berenson was the epicenter of disinformation and radiated outward to the persuadable public. And I'm just skipping through here. I'm not even going through all these. Flatteringly stated, not to sound like a broken record, but how much content is being demoted and how effective are you at mitigating reach and how quickly? Flattery told Facebook, are you guys effing serious? I want an answer on what happened here and I want it today. Sounds like a pretty explicit threat to me. Letter M, White House Press Secretary Psaki stated, and I quote, we're in regular touch with these social media platforms and those engagements typically happen through members of our senior staff, but also members of our COVID-19 team. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation. Psaki also stated, one of the White House asks of social media companies was to create a robust enforcement strategy. Psaki stated on the February 1st, 2022 White House press conference that the White House wanted every social media platform to do more to call out misinformation and disinformation and to uplift accurate information. Another one, hey folks, wanted to flag the below tweet and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process of having it removed ASAP. Sounds like a pretty explicit demand from the White House to me. Again, quoting the opinion, these actions are just a few examples of the unrelenting pressure the defendants exerted against social media companies. This court finds the above examples demonstrate that plaintiffs can likely prove the White House defendants engaged in coercion to induce social media companies to suppress free speech. Mr. Sauer, in the limited time that I have, can you just comment further on, these are just some of the highlights that are in the opinion, and illustrate to us all of the evidence of the White House censoring the American public and working with social media companies to accomplish that?
It's very telling that the judicial findings are quite specific on the specific threats. So there's several ways you can violate the First Amendment if you're a government official. One is coercion, one is significant encouragement, one is joint participation, where you've insinuated yourselves into private decision making. The court found all of those present here. And with respect to those White House communications, there's a series of specific judicial findings that these statements were threatening. They were threatening adverse legal consequences. There's multiple findings, for example, that White House spokesperson Psaki's public statements explicitly linked the threat of adverse legal consequences to the White House's demands for censorship, which we didn't know at the time but now know were being very aggressively peppered on the social media platforms while she was making those public statements. So you have public statements from the White House. Also, White House Communications Director Bedingfield, there's a very specific judicial finding on that. Threatening adverse legal consequences in public if there's not greater censorship, and in private you've got Rob Flaherty, Andy Slavitt, other White House officials saying, take this down, do more to take down borderline content.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Mr. Chairman, I have unanimous consent request.
Gentleman from Louisiana.
There's a lot of talk about this preliminary injunction, so I'd like to enter into the record a 155-page court opinion, the memorandum ruling on a request for preliminary injunction in the matter of State of Missouri and Louisiana v. Biden from the U.S. District Court, Western District, Louisiana, Monroe Division, and also the Fifth Circuit's administrative stay, which does not address the